Today's guest is Stephen Quatrano, aka Q. He's been a CTO, a big deal consultant, a multi-founder, worked for Fortune 100, started his own firms. I've met Q many years ago. We're sitting at an outdoor cafe in Santana Row in the heart of Silicon Valley. And ever since then, amazing conversation. He's been a wealth of fascinating conversation, inspiration, and innovation. Q, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
It's so
very fun
to in
here. Connect with you after all these years. It's great.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm so glad that you're game to do this. So start off by telling the listeners a little bit about what you're doing now and what you love about it.
The latest has been a startup that's been slow getting going. It's my fifth startup. And I think it's the one I'm the most passionate about that I've ever experienced. And of course, each one sort of feels that way when you're in it. But this one has been interrupted. COVID was a huge blow. And I'm older now, and I have a lot of other things going on. So it's much more difficult for me to focus and think about things. But it's very cool. And what we're really doing is I'm thinking a lot about aging, elder care, and just the huge problems which are also opportunities with the number of people aging and the fundamental problem of social isolation and loneliness. And the ways these sort of compound these dimensions of our social and cultural milieu compound to create all kinds of health problems, which, based on the research, it's worse than smoking. Isolation is dangerous. We're social creatures, and we need connection with people. And so we fiddled around with a bunch of ideas, and we came up with this idea that media is something that people should do together. And we've created these basically a library of very short, provocative pieces, which are like trailers. You kind of think of them, but the difference is instead of the call to action being to get you to see a movie you haven't seen, it's a call to action to remember something that you have experienced and to re-experience it with someone else. And the idea is to invite a conversation. So we embed really iconic images and sound in a reframed and repurposed prompt. I would get on Zoom with my dad, and instead of asking him what he's having for breakfast and what happened yesterday and hearing about his hip and his whatever, I say, Dad, I found this thing on the web. Let's watch it. And it says Yogi Berra was a great catcher, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the 1950s, America. And there's a picture of Jackie Robinson stealing home with Yogi Berra at the plate. And my dad got so excited he sees the picture. And we ended up having a 1-hour conversation about growing up in upstate New York and playing baseball and loving the Yankees and the whole thing. And I got it all on video. So I recorded this whole thing. And I've done this with hundreds of elders now. And it's a challenge to find things that they can talk about. But when you do, it's incredibly rewarding. It's just unbelievable. So the idea here is that
I love that angle of using technology to facilitate connection.
That's right.
That angle of innovation is awesome.
And we've had a lot of difficulty figuring out the sort of go-to-market, how this would work, especially in the early stages. And after experimenting with a bunch of things, I think that the key is going to be these agencies, which place the professional caregivers or paraprofessional caregivers, where the high quality, the high end of this huge industry wants to place people for years. And their number one problem is recruiting and retaining and developing talent. And what they're looking for are people who form connections with the families that they support.
And you started this effort in this company pre-pandemic, like that focus on connection and how can we use technology to solve some of these problems for isolation. That became very front and center during the pandemic, but you were, as usual, ahead of the curve. What spurred you to focus on this at that time?
The approach that we took didn't work so well during the pandemic because we really were looking for direct engagement. And that particular dimension, everybody withdrew. And so lots of social contexts for elders, retirement centers, senior housing, independent living, they were devastated by this, and people were in their rooms. And technology doesn't work for lots of older adults by themselves. So this idea really requires somebody to be with them in the room. And my dad's wife is his facilitator. So she would set up the YouTube. So my dad and I could have the YouTube, the Zoom. So my dad and I could have the Zoom conversation. But without her help, he couldn't really do the Zoom.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
when I'm with him, it's a different story. I can open up my phone and we watch the thing together, and then he sees it and I see it, and I say how I feel, and then he says how he feels, and that reminds me of the time that I did this and you did that, and it
Yeah.
reminds me. And that's how it goes. But having that direct connection was that we stopped that. A lot of that was interrupted with COVID. But I think that the other thing is, I think that we have this whole screen thing. Part of the problem is we all have our own screens. And so the screen stuff is all very engaging, but everyone's engaged with their own screen. And if you're engaged for many minutes, you have thousands of reactions to and then that's gone. And how you can't recall that emotional path that you took
Yeah.
by yourself. You can't share it. And the more screens we have, the less we share. So I'm really looking about small screens and screens that people can share in real space that are emotionally engaging and like provocative and things like that. So anyway, these are all engineered to basically get people to talk about things like legacy and purpose and values and connections, family, things like that.
Yeah. So question for you. You mentioned that is your fifth founding experience. I imagine this time around your success criteria are a bit different than they have been in the past. What has that journey led to for you? What is that sort of growth process for you? How do you define success now? And how's that changed?
Well, that's a good question. It should be pretty clear, even from like when I can't quit this startup because I'm so excited about it. But that was true. That was true of every startup that I've been involved with. So I'm more of an applications guy than a systems guy. So I've always been interested in impact in terms of how people use the technology. And I've always been interested in community. This is not something that has ever really been apparent. It's emerged. I can see this connection now looking back across all the work that I did. I started in the 80s we rode the wave of mini computers coming into Wall Street and building departmental computing, which was all networked. And it was all about workflow and getting people to work together and automating processes that were innovative, new kinds of business processes. So that's computer as a collaboration platform.
Yeah.
And then I got involved with networking. And then there was network databases, same kind of idea, distributed computing. And then there was Webline, which is when we met, when Cisco acquired us, and we discovered omnichannel, this idea of businesses are getting their customers to use their computers using the internet. And when customers use your computers, you're creating a network of suppliers and partners and customers, and you're all using the same computers. And what you want is this idea of context to inform every engagement. Once again, it's community, it's working together, releasing that energy is really beautiful to see people get enthusiastic about helping one another and building teams.
Yeah.
I think the fourth one was really about professional networks. We ran into the financial crisis in 2009. It wasn't pretty.
Imagine that was quite the learning experience.
Everyone tried to raise money. I remember watching CNN going, "Oh no, oh no, we don't have enough cash to last through this," and it wasn't good. But anyway, it's all about networking, and this one is just the most explicit, I guess I want to say. And also thinking about networking that really, not that I don't have a problem that these networks were serving a business, because I thought the businesses were serving people too. So that was always fine. It's like a customer service is it's dignifying, right? When you really understand how you can support customers, it can be exciting. It's a mission. But this is a community that is 65 million people are taking care of a spouse or a parent, 65 million Americans for 20 hours a week or more. That's like a third of Americans. It's a part-time, at least a part-time job, could be a full-time job. And many people are doing this while they're working.
Yeah.
It's a whole part of our world that's invisible because these people aren't paid for it. And the question is the quality of that community. What are those hours and hours like? So it's always been about passion and mission and quality of life and community. But this time, I think it's really more explicitly about a community that serves people, not just investors. See, I'm not
Yeah.
anti-investors. I'm just
No, and I see a recurring thread through all this too. Of pretty much every project you were involved with was in some way using technology to facilitate connection.
that's
It's
true.
probably the most blatant now, and it's a new angle and a new facet. For that's really interesting. Where do you want to see this go? What are you excited to do most in the future with this?
It's already had a huge impact on my life. I think of the number of, I have experiences with hundreds of sessions that I've run with in my relationships with advisors who are geriatric psychologists and caregivers, that just seeing that network, which I think is so vital and so underappreciated, underfunded, understaffed, seeing it thrive or even helping it a little bit would be just hugely rewarding. I would love to find some young people who want to manage this business because embedded in this business, there's another business that I don't really want to talk about publicly yet. But there's a technology story in here, which is potentially very large platform. But I'm very leery of I don't want to start a platform business. I'm really tired of trying to convince people that we need another platform and they don't know what the killer app is yet.
Yeah.
I'm starting with the killer app, but what I have is a platform that makes the app almost free. So the idea is that these stories should be almost free and anybody can make them, but I want people to write them. There is probably a role here for speech generation, text generation, AI. But I'm also very interested in that could be an assistance so that we could be assisted by those services. But I like this idea that these are people telling stories because the storytelling itself is redemptive. It's
Yeah.
part of building this community. I would like to see some young people take this and blow it away. And then I'd like to see this platform take hold and enable lots of different kinds of storytelling and writing with iconic images. And that's the
Nice.
clue.
All right. Okay. All right,
Audio
before
and
we get to your
video.
official call to action to wrap us up, I want to pull a couple nuggets of wisdom out of you
All right.
first. One being, what would you advise somebody who's maybe on their first startup, not their fifth? What are some lessons you would give your younger self? What is some advice you give somebody on their first go around?
Just, oh my God. I've, you can learn so much from the people you're working with. When people say, I'm going to find another job, and I think, have you really learned everything that you can learn from the job that you're in? Look around and what lessons can you learn? And I've had the best mentors, every single one of my jobs. And the other one is I grow my network. You pay attention to the people you're with, look around, you're going to have another job at some point. Those people are going to have other jobs. The job doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the company. You've only got your career and your network. And so you want to feed that network, grow it and develop it. And every job is a chance to meet people and grow. And you never know. People like Elizabeth will contact you 10 years after you thought they were gone. Oh my God.
They come back around again. It can't get rid of me that easy, Q.
I love working with you. So happy that you're still doing it. Oh, even though it's completely different now. So I would say that's it. I just think that looking for mentors is a key. And the flip side is if you've been there a long time, look for mentees. You have institutional knowledge, you have all this stuff, and the people who are younger people around you are bringing experiences of a different generation to the workplace, and you can learn from that. This is one of the worst things I've had in this experience, is in part because of COVID, but also just because I'm like old and white, male and technical, is I don't have young people working with me anymore. And that I got that feedback. It's very clear from would-be investors and from partners is my team's not right. It's not complete. I need a writer. I need a writer. I need a young writer who's enthusiastic about media. I need people with caregiving experience. Definitely, I need young women of color because everybody that we're working with they don't look like me. And I've had very definite challenges teaching them and motivating them and writing content that they can use because my voice is just hopelessly narrow.
So you
They,
mentioned
they
about
say
learning
they
from the
say that I'm
people.
funny. They say that I'm cerebral. And I'm like, is that good?
Not sure how
It's
to
too
interpret that one.
cerebral. No, it's not good. It means inaccessible.
You mentioned about learning from the people that you're working with, and I'm a big fan of focusing on culture. I think a lot of times we look at culture as an afterthought, when in reality it is. I'm obsessed with this idea that culture breeds innovation. And I'm curious how you've seen that play out before, of when you do really tap into the full potential of the people around you. I feel like those are the best environments where innovation really does thrive. Have you seen that? Have you changed your perspective on that? What is your take?
Yeah, it's so let me think about that. I think trust is a huge thing. It's really
Mm,
hard for people to feel like they can be honest about what you're doing. And so when you're working with a group, you need people to be able to say, that's a crazy idea. Or even, I don't understand what you're saying. So one of the problems I've had is, especially as I've gotten older, and is people, it seems like I'm communicating, but actually people aren't understanding. And they're not telling me that they don't understand. Because asking a question would reveal uncertainty or ignorance or something. And so I would go forward faster and being more enthusiastic and thinking I got people with me, but we don't. And so
mm,
one of the questions about culture is not just feeling like I'm free to explore ideas, but everyone, the people that you're with, can respond and tell you, "What? I don't know what you're talking about," or "Have you thought this through?" Another aspect, though, I think that's often attributed to a culture that inhibits innovation is fear of change in a workplace. And so sometimes the fear isn't a fear of me or appearing like you don't understand, but not being certain whether or not these innovative ideas are acceptable in the workplace.
mhm.
These imply that we need to change in some ways. A culture, I think it's tricky. Sometimes there's dimensions of change which are, and people are all excited about, but there's other dimensions beyond a certain boundary. No, that's not okay because that's not our business. We don't go there. We don't do that. That's not how we work. That's not how it's done. Whatever. That's subtle. Trying to figure out, is this a culture that's opposed to innovation, or is it a culture that is just needs more assurance that we want to think more openly about the business and maybe consider dimensions that we haven't considered before? So yeah, I think that's, whether it's culture or leadership, I don't know. But it's pretty important when it comes to innovation.
Whichever angle you coming
Yep.
from. I don't think
Yep.
you can have a culture without leadership support. Leadership does dictate culture. So that is huge. I think your point of, is it in an environment that allows for those inputs, is huge. That's a huge piece of it. The other part is, I was just having this conversation with my 10-year-old recently. Communication is two parts. It's partially what you say and it's partially what the other person receives. And you have
That's
to
right.
be mindful of both of them to ensure that communication lands.
I've made a lot of mistakes too. I think that when you have a culture of, I don't want to use any names, but I've
This is a
I've
safe
had
space, Q.
people. Yeah, I've had people, when you're in a highly performing business and everyone's heads down and you're really working hard. They told me it's a factory, Steve. Stay out of the factory.
Yeah.
You're confusing the workers. They're trying to get things done, and you're trying to tell them all the things they should be doing. And I'm like, no, I'm not really trying to disrupt what they're doing. That's a bad kind of disruption. But I'm asking them to think with me about these things. And sometimes it's just not possible. that you really
Yeah.
need permission and to set aside space, because the definition of a high performance team is we're focused on what we're doing, and we
Yeah.
want to do it again and again, and we want to do it better and better. And my innovative ideas are just not welcome in that environment. And I don't think that's wrong. I think it depends is the real answer. It
Yeah.
depends on the business. Sometimes it is wrong. And I took that feedback. Q, get out of the factory. Oh my gosh.
Well, we could do a whole other podcast just on that topic right there. But in the interest of time, let's wrap up with a call to action. For people that want to get involved in the mission you're in now, how can people find you? What would you recommend them do?
The company's called Meema Stories. You can go to Meema Stories.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Stephen Quatrano. They can find me through you.
We'll put all your information in the show notes.
And I'm definitely interested in finding people who will be inspired by this business of storytelling and media to engage elders and their caregivers in conversation. So writers, media people, lawyers, people who understand copyright and caregiving, that whole business.
Awesome. If you want to join with Q on his mission, you can find all his information in the show notes. Thank you so much. As always, Q, it's such a pleasure to talk to you.